Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 24th of November 2023. If you don't know what the lines on my map means, where have you been? Check out the key on the screen now. Pause the video if you want. Right, we go to the northeastern sector and or axis. ISW don't seem to have produced a report yesterday. I don't know if Thanksgiving's got in the way or something like that. Nonetheless, I will bumble through my appraisal of the front line with my own sources. And thanks to JR again for doing the mapping today. He's indefatigable. Just one word, I love it. Right, let's go to Kupiansk, to Svatova, to Crimea, this area. And we can see that according to Syriac maps, there are some Ukrainian gains in the Avdiivka Yehidna area. This is where the Russians have been putting pressure on the Ukrainians, taking some ground. I don't know whether there's a counterattack that's taking place there, but if this is a whole area where the Russians are getting ready for a big counteroffensive, there are still rumors about that possibly taking place up here, maybe down Crimea way. It's useful if Ukraine can bite back and get some of that territory in some small localized counterattacks. And it also may talk to this idea that Russia might not be as strong as some people have been thinking in the area. I don't know. We shall see. But that is good news nonetheless for the Ukrainians. I just hope that it wasn't a rejig. Right, as we come further to the south, you can see no change, but there will undoubtedly have been repelled attacks from both sides along this front down to Crimea. Seversk has been relatively quiet of late, so I don't know whether there's any activity going on there, as is the very top of this north of Solidar and north of Bakhmut there. But as we come round the corner, come past this highway coming into the north of Bakhmut, the 40 highway, there is generally more activity going down to the Kremova area north of Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Still no change to the map there. We do have some Russian gains in this northern part of the front line near Klishchivka. That's sort of matching up with what Syriac maps has from Deep State's point of view. Deep State has the Russians pushing over the railway line in certain areas and certainly up to the railway line in others, getting control of this small I don't know, chalk pits there or something. But yeah, the Russians there have been claims that they've pushed into the northern outskirts of Klishchivka, but they certainly seem to have regained control or are in the process of regaining control over parts of the railway line as it skirts around Klishchivka and comes down to the south. No claims about activity further towards Avdiivka and Kurdyamivka. There is a source that has so we have, it's not this one, it's this one. The mortars unit of the Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade hit Russian positions on a railway embankment near Avdiivka, and it looks like Russian forces have recaptured a part of the positions there. Geolocation on the next post, which we'll go to now. So we'll geolocate this, areas around the tunnel. That is copy. These are mortar units, as mentioned, hitting Russian positions. So these are Russian positions, which would support Syriac Maps' claim that the Russians have pushed back into part of Avdiivka. They're certainly at the railway line, or at least were at that point. Of course, there are options here that could be plausible, that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back since that was geolocated, that the Russians didn't have strong control over it, or they've got even further. So it's difficult to know. That at least supports what Syriac Maps is saying has taken place there, if nothing else. Okay, and then no report says of the Bakhmut-Kurdyamivka axis. After the Ukrainians had initially crossed the railway track east of Avdiivka, the area became contested, so that geolocation fits into that. Due to Russian counterattacks, the situation is dynamic and changes every 24 hours, and then that fits into the idea that it can go back and forth. But in general, neither side really moves forward. That's possibly why Andrew Perpetua has kept his line where it is. just waiting to see what happens as the dust settles. But Bakhmut, still an area where the Russians are putting an awful lot of pressure on the Ukrainians. Now, I'm actually going to rewind a little bit and go to here, because here we have, oh no, that's from the 23rd. Yeah, it's from yesterday. Ukraine made new advances in Avdiivka to the south of that town. I'm pretty sure I reported that yesterday, though, to be honest. But nevertheless, that's why JL's not got it on here. And I was talking about how they are probably rejigging the map rather than showing Ukrainian success there. So, yeah, I'll move on. As a little glitch in my brain there. Right, let's go to Avdiivka, where, as you can see, the Russians have made gains according to Syriac maps in this area by a sort of filtration plant here, just north of the southeastern industrial zone where Russia have had some success, and near the Tsarska Ochota restaurant where they've had some success over the last week. Right, let's see what the sources say about this. I'm going to drop into probably null reports first. There's just a general observation. This has come from Stupen. It says that Russia has accumulated over 40,000 troops in the area of Avdiivka. So I guess the idea is that, hey, the Russians have a lot of troops around Avdiivka. They've got a lot of troops in the central military district sort of area here, and a lot of grouping, and a lot of troops up here, even more to the north. Slightly degraded troops, but ready to go apparently in this area, and then in Avdiivka. Whether they really are ready to go and how many of those troops are combat ready frontline troops, or whether that includes logistics and HR and I don't know, medics and engineers and whatnot, it's difficult to know. But there are still these warning shots being fired by some of these spokesmen in different areas saying, yeah, Avdiivka has a lot of Russian troops. They could go hard there. They can go harder up north as well. No reports goes on to say Russians managed to take control over a crossing on the M30 motorway and the adjacent area of to the east of this, near Krasnohorivka. That's up north. Russians have moved a bit north in the direction of Novokalnyova, and heavy battles continue for Stepova. So if we go and look at his maps, this will be the road coming down around here. This road. I think that's where he's meaning. So, yeah, lots of activity around here. Now, what's interesting about this area is that Syriac maps initially yesterday said that the Russian army broke the Ukrainian army defenses, 2014 defenses, which is this, I guess, this blue line there, and took control over the Donetsk filtration plant. And I was contacted by, because I reported that yesterday, I was contacted by Andrew Perpetua, who privately said, by the way, Syriac maps used Geraman as a source. Now, Geraman or Geraman, however you pronounce it, let's go and find him, is a Twitter source who is entirely dubious, like one of the most outspoken pro-Russian or Russian shills. And he is really not to be trusted. So he gets an awful lot of people that have taken the mickey out of him, or gets into Twitter spats with people like, you know, Defmon3, although I haven't heard from Defmon for years, ages, and these sorts of people. So anyway, Geraman, like, time will tell is his kind of tagline, and often time tells that he's talking a load of nonsense. Anyway, what Andrew Perpetua said, that we'd often thought that Geraman uses Syriac maps as a source, but here's a time when Syriac maps has used Geraman as a source and made this claim about the filtration plant. And then he's like, it might be true, but, you know, form tells me it's probably not. And he's plucked this out of his posterior. And anyway, today, I just find this really interesting. Today, Syriac map says, situation south of Avdiivka, despite entering the no man's land area, Russia was unable to consolidate the control over the filtration station as Ukrainians continue holding the defences along the H20 road adjacent to the station. The clashes between both sides continue there. Reading between the lines, is he's now found out that that's just complete BS and has kind of sold this as, oh, they've been unable to consolidate it. There's still clashes, so on and so forth, and walked back the initial claims. Although with a little bit of gain for the Ukrainians, because as you can see, it went from this orange line, and now they're still in front of the orange line. So whether Geraman was just talking complete BS or whether he's overselling what had actually happened, probably likely that second one. Direct Maps has taken on board what he has said uncritically and then had to walk it back, which is something we often see. But it's just, I find it, well, not unsurprising that that's happened. But I guess it's quite that Direct Maps has walked it back. But I find it quite surprising that he's using Geraman as actual like source. I think that's pretty controversial. Right, as far as other activity around Avdiivka, lots of stuff going on. There's still huge amounts of losses. In fact, we saw that there were 1,100 personnel losses for the Russians, as according to the Ukrainian General Staff, that they've lost 100 bits of kit. Even if you take a third of that off, it's still, 60 to 70 pieces of kit and 700-800 people lost. A lot of that will be underwritten by activity in Avdiivka, no doubt. There's an awful lot of drone footage coming out of Russian losses left, right, and centre. A lot of personnel losses as well as sort of vehicle losses. So it is going to be challenging for them there. We are then going to come on down. There are no changes to my mappers, at least, until we get. Well, we're going to come down to Robotyne. There are no changes there. But, and by the way, as you can see, there are all these defences. The yellow lines denote the Russian defences. And one of the most common questions I get asked is, well, what are the Ukrainians doing for building defences for the, the occasion when the Russians themselves go on the attack, like in Avdiivka? What have the Ukrainians done around here? And it's a bit of an unknown. I mean, Andrew Perpetua talks a lot about how maybe this river offers just around here, offers a defensive line for the Russians, for the Ukrainians, sorry. Don't know that they built anything in front of that. You could imagine something that looks like that, but I don't really know what they've built. Well, interestingly, this came out today. Let me just find the source. So this is flash news saying in Ukraine, a working group on the construction of fortifications was created. This was announced by the head of the Ministry of Statistics, Mikhailo Fedorov. He seems to be the head of all sorts. The group will operate 24/7 as an operational headquarters and coordinate the efforts of all authorities in the military. Quite why it's taken this long for that to happen, I don't know. That seems highly controversial. But rather than people building defences kind of off their own backs, or particular commanders in certain areas, district commanders and generals like controlling different areas of the front line, it looks like it's a centralized project so that they can coordinate all defense building and have an overall, I guess, strategy of what is to take place there. But that's great news that they are doing that, I guess, but quite why, as I say, it's taken that long, I don't know. Right, we'll go and look at Robotyne, Verbova areas. So, no report says the Ukrainians are attacking west of Robotyne and that they have made minor advancements towards Kopani. For now, I have only added a conservative advance, but the advance likely goes deeper west, waiting for confirmation, and then attacks towards Novoprokopivka continue on the outskirts. Indeed, there's some footage of Russian destroyed vehicles around Novoprokopivka. So this is the idea that the Ukrainians have possibly taken some territory here towards Kopani, coming from the east, from the Robotyne area, and they're also still pushing south towards Novoprokopivka with footage of the odd bit of kit getting taken out by the Russian kit getting taken out by the Ukrainians there. Right, then we're going to come down to Kherson, and as you can see, lots of pins here, but these pins don't quite denote what you think they do. Before we go there, let's have a look at some of the sources. First thing I have to say is a correction, and the correction is coming from GeoConfirmed here. I showed you, and it was doing the rounds yesterday, some footage of Ukrainians liberating a village in Kherson looks like the right time of year, liberating a village and villagers getting really happy. And I was like, I don't quite know where this is, but it's interesting that that is happening. And anyway, it's being geo-confirmed as, or at least chronologically confirmed as taking place in the liberation of Kherson last year in 2022. Not footage I'd seen before, but nonetheless that was found. So that's a correction. I've got a second correction to make as well. As someone pointed out, and I'm going to go back up to Avdiivka, where there is no doubt still fighting taking place. This is between Bakhmut and Avdiivka, where there are these big, I call them slag heaps. The correction I'm going to make concerns the use of the term slag heaps. So apparently slag heaps are what you get from coke manufacturing. So the slag heap at Terrakon up or down in Avdiivka, in the north of Avdiivka, is indeed a slag heap. These apparently are not slag heaps. They are, I don't know what they are, mine piles. Get off mine piles. Sounds all a bit dubious. Yeah, I don't know what you call them, but mountains of not slag as a result of other types of mining. I don't know whether I'm just going to call them slag heaps still and just be wrong. I'm not a fan of just being consistently wrong, but I might do that. It's a bit like me calling everything, all Gimlers, HIMARS out of ease, but you know that they might not be HIMARS. They could be the M270 Mars 2 or whatever. Anyway, you get the point. There's another correction. Right, let's go back to my sources. So what's going on in this area? So from the Russian soldiers transferred from Klishchiivka to Krynky, so that's an interesting move from Bakhmut down to Kherson, to relieve the 810th Brigade. The 810th jumped in about a month ago to help, though it was undergoing refitting after being withdrawn themselves from Robotyne. Again, these kind of sources talk to the idea that Russians don't have strength in depth in terms of reserves. Anyway, this is what the Google translation says. It's a bit choppy, so if you can understand more of it than me, then you're a better man or woman than I am. Yes, when we entered these positions, there were people from the 810th and 144th sitting there. The trenches had no ceilings. There were no dugouts. When this was told to them, they simply twisted our head, saying that if it flies in, nothing will help. But they don't care that they are being hit because they are being fired at, because a large number of people are sitting in the trenches. It took us 4 days to kick them out of the forest and another 3 days to take 2 streets. But after leaving and transferring positions to the same 144th and 810th, we find out that the expletive are back in the forest. What this seems to indicate is that the Russians had pushed the Ukrainians back out of the forest in the Krynky area, which kind of checks out because we had this gain that went all the way down to here. I don't know if you remember, there was the idea that the Russians had actually, or the Ukrainians had actually gained this kind of area, and then it got pushed back to there, and that could be that the Russians really did push the Ukrainians back out of the forest and back into Krynky and take a couple of roads back in Krynky. But we find out that they're back in the forest, so then this is push and shove. Let me remind you, the 810th, and not only I know that they entered through their Fdang, don't know what that means, was the reason why the forelocks ended up in the cans. Don't know what that means. People did not have a line of defense, ready-made positions, equipped basements for a long time while Kherson stood without fighting. They were so absorbed that they simply lived in their own homes. I also think that this is the negligence of the commanders. In other words, the Russians weren't really prepared here. They blew up the Novikakhovka Dam, flooded this whole area, and thought, well, the Ukrainians aren't going to attack, so they kind of put themselves in Ukrainian houses and rested up. Didn't build the requisite defenses, and as a result, the Ukrainians were better able to take advantage here and push the Russians back. The claim here is that they were just absorbed with sitting back and taking over these houses, and the commanders were also negligent. Right, the next source here is purportedly showing, or you can hear, I'm not playing it, you don't really need to hear it, it's gunfire that you can hear in Novikakhovka. This is uplifting for the population living on the left bank. Now, what this means, possibly, is that there is either activity further up this bank towards Kosanka and Dnipriani towards Novikakhovka, or there are other incursions across the river from the Ukrainians. But it could be that the Ukrainians are just getting closer and closer, which is good news, or you can just hear the gunfire from Krynky anyway. What's the distance as a crow flies to Novokakovka? That's about 17 kilometers, 15 kilometers probably to the outskirts. So yeah, I don't know whether you'd be able to hear that gunfire in at that distance, so it could indicate getting closer. Right, as you can see, lots of pins here, but there's no change to the map. So why all these pins here? Well, actually, this is an interesting change of mapping, both around the railway bridge, the Antonivsky railway bridge, and also around Krynky here, as well as a little bit of gains for the Ukrainians into forest areas. So sorry, there are some gains, but these two back here are not gains in terms of the Russian defensive line. Okay, I'm talking about Philip Pierce, get on. Right, this is Andrew Perpetua's map. And on his map, of course, he shows, because I assimilate 3 different mappers, I can't show the Ukrainian defensive lines and Russian defensive lines. But of course, if I go to Andrew Perpetua, he will show both. And what those pins are indicating for you guys is that the Ukrainians have actually got control over more of the grey zone than they previously did. And this includes along the, I guess, the left bank, although not as far as the settlements, but in terms of the delta and the main river part, opposite the settlement where the railway bridge comes across, the Antonivsky railway bridge, they've taken firm control, as according to Andrew Perpetua, of this area. And if you come up, on the way, there's still some firm control along the bank there. If you come up to Krynky, this is significant. So this is a change. Andrew Perpetua has changed the mapping so that in this grey area, the Ukrainians have far more control, solid control. They've been here for long enough now that this is now fully under their control, and they are, one would presume, getting troops and equipment across there. So that is a change, as well as you can see here, that deep yellow bit, they've actually taken control or pushed the Russians back outside of Krynky and into the forest area again, as they may have done previously. So we've got some gains for the Ukrainians here and some consolidation of grey zones at a couple of points along the river there. So it's looking slightly better for the Ukrainians there. I was worried that they're struggling here, and I still think it might be. I think the Russians are going to be throwing as much as they can at the Ukrainians here to stop them, but the Russians don't have a strength in depth to do that, as you can see from the sources I keep sharing with you. So it is a challenge for the Russians here, but the Ukrainians really need to take advantage of this, and they need to do it sooner rather than later. Now, this is another source to suggest that things aren't great for the Russians. Goodwill gesture, 20 already deserted a few days ago, says P*11. So this is the idea that 20 soldiers in the area, Russian soldiers, deserted recently, which tells you it's not easy for them. Well, what do we have here? Let's quickly run through this. Another unit complaining. Servicemen of the 26th Regiment, 2nd Battalion. We appeal to the Minister of Defense, Shoigu. We ask to look into the situation unfolding in Krynky. So again, more complaints. We were deployed here on the 30th of July 2023. So you're now, how many months later? July is the 7th month. We're in the 11th. We're basically 4 months later. Still no rotation, not a single day off. So they haven't had a day off at all in 4 months. We were deployed without ammo. We each had 4 to 6 magazines. Some didn't have armor. Our commander, call sign Zhimei. His name is Zladko Alexander Petrovich. They're calling him out Lieutenant Colonel, I think. Don't even know his rank. He put a huge expletive on us. Our battalion commander is fighting for rotation. They won't let us rest. Yesterday, Zhimei was forcing our battalion commander to deploy us on the islands. In other words, their commander, not the overall lieutenant colonel, the battalion commander, but their immediate commander wants them rotated, but has been forced to deploy these troops to the islands, and they don't want to go. At the moment, the islands are taken up by Ukrainians who can only be beaten out with FAB bombs. Again, it's all about reading between the lines here or taking these inferences. So this is another claim that the FAB bombs are the most effective thing that the Russians are bringing to bear in the defense of the Dnipro River here, but just in general, I think they're just incredibly potent. But he wants to deploy us there. On the opposite, we should be withdrawn after 4 months to rest. He was reporting from day one that everything is really good here. But he was saying we're intact, but in reality, from 3 companies, we have 50 people remaining. That's insanely bad. I mean, depends how many you've got in a companies, but that's at least down to a third. So yeah, not good. I'll just confirm that in a second. Soldiers, officers, all in one pile, 50 people. Now he's forcing us onto the islands. 4th company specifically. He says, no one will go there. We're not afraid. We do not leave positions. If we did, Ukrainians would have taken all of Krynky. Currently, our lads are fighting back. It's fine, but no one will go to the islands. If he wants, he can come here, get in a boat as a senior, and we'll go to the islands. He killed our people. He was reporting that everything is great here. But in reality, 3 companies are dead and wounded. He wants to send 50 of us to be killed to hide his tracks. This won't work. Again, we do not abandon our posts. We're asking for rotation. I think that's a fascinating insight into what is going on in that area. Yeah, so just looking at this, I was a bit unsure about company because there's so many differences of opinion as to how many, and differences of reality. Certain troop concentrations will have like 30 troops in a company, others 50, and I'm just looking at, depending on the type of troops, size of company can be from 30 to 150 soldiers. So that they're at least reduced to a third, reduced by 2/3, but it could be as much as to around 10% of their original force. So it just depends. But it is they are combat ineffective, as according to most guides, if that is to be believed, and there's no reason not to believe that. What's interesting is this idea, and again, this goes back to what I guess Andrew Perpetua is saying about the control here, is that this is grey zone. We'll go and fight in Krynky, and we're doing an okay job of defending there. Thank you very much. But we're not going to the islands. We'll just get hammered there. The Ukrainians control the islands. The only thing that has an effect on the islands is FOB 500 bombs dropped by aviation 50 kilometers back. But I presume that also means our artillery doesn't even do a very good job in the area because our artillery has been degraded. There's lots you can take from these things. And assuming that they are broadly true, so much to glean. Now, again, this suggests that things aren't well in terms of reserves. If they're not being rotated, it means the Russians are unable to rotate them. In order to rotate them, you have to draw from other places along the front line, and they just can't do that. Or, as we heard the other day, they're throwing in these blind, broken troops that are basically injured or whatever, and shoving them into kind of stormtrooper groups to try and attack the Ukrainians. That's not good news for the Russians, but it doesn't mean it's easy for the Ukrainians. They're still fighting against people, boots on the ground, that are still there. Now, P-Star 1-1, the final source here, disciplinary issues on the left bank for the Moscow boys. Toplinsky will organise high-quality work, more reserves brought in. Okay, what's going on here? Briefly about the Kherson direction. In recent days, a commander of the Dnipro group has taken the task of establishing disciplinary and administrative order in the forward units. In particular, officers who grossly violated the regulations and neglected their assigned units will have the opportunity to try themselves among stormtroopers. The first one has already begun. In other words, any insubordinate commanders get sent in as stormtroopers. In addition, fresh reinforcements arrived from the rear from very well equipped and trained reserves. Okay, this is going totally against what I just said. Mikhail Yuryevich and a team of senior officers are working to organize high quality combat work. On my own behalf, I would only wish the command to pay close attention to the problem of FPV drones and drone bombers, which are pretty annoying to our guys. So, not the strongest criticism of the use of drones, or other people have said drones are being a real issue. It's like they're pretty annoying. They are obviously killing people and destroying equipment. But interestingly, saying that they are getting fresh reserves that are well equipped and well trained. Now, that is the single first example of a Russian source saying that. Particularly in this area, we occasionally hear it from Ukrainians saying, "Hey, they're not all badly trained. There are good troops," and I'm never saying that. There are good troops in certain places, and they will be doing good jobs here and there. But what do the Russians have to draw from? Well, all the other sources suggesting that they don't have strength in depth. That one saying they are getting resources from from the rear. I'll be interested to see where they are being taken from. We did hear last week that there were reserves being taken from Mariupol, Berdyansk being taken up, possibly towards Volnovakha. There were claims that they might have been brought to bear in the Vuhledar area. They apparently are troops that have been trained for a year, but I don't know quite what they were keeping them for. Anyway, they were apparently being sent up in this direction. They might have carried on going towards Avdiivka, you never know. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on all of the above, but particularly here in Kherson, where the Ukrainians, I think, have to capitalize on what they've achieved so far and keep pushing to gain a greater foothold and get some more meaningful equipment across the river. Anyway, thanks as ever for your viewership. Really appreciate that and all the support you give me. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.